Good evening, everybody. We'll start the recap of the Wednesday, 9th of February. We'll start off with the usual housekeeping. The fire alarm rings, please exit the room through the main doors, go down the stairs you came up, and assemble outside where directed by officers. Please switch your mobile devices to silent mode. Speakers will have 3 minutes. After that, you will hear a tone and be asked to wind up. This is the only opportunity the public have to speak, so please do not interrupt during the rest of the debate. No clapping, cheering or booing, please, and please can you remain seated during the meeting. Some of the things to add. As you can see, the meeting is now being broadcast live on YouTube. Second thing is, for each speaker, members of the committee can ask the speaker any questions they wish. Okay, so that's not normally done, but the Constitution's been altered. So members, and it's only members, can ask the speaker any questions or clarification on what was said. That doesn't mean you have to ask questions, but you can. And after the first application has been decided, there'll be a 10-minute break for the second one to allow people to move out of the chamber. So we'll now move on. Are there any apologies for absence, please?
Councillor Daventry and Councillor Philbin will be acting to substitute.
Thank you. Declarations of interest, anybody?
Yes, it's a very small interest, and but I better declare it. One of the doctor who used to be a factory, I know his father very well because he sells birds in Norfolk. So I just wanted to declare it. I'm involved with the father of the doctor, but that's all. I just wanted that to be clear. Thank you.
No, that's fine, thank you. Minutes.
Excuse me, Chair.
Sorry.
There might be another interesting issue. Attached to an email we sent by Andrea Ledson, MP, in December, was an email from the practice manager at the surgery, suggesting that she sent a letter of support to all the members of the committee, which we all received. I only happened to notice this email from Tracy Reimer this afternoon. It's underneath Andrea Ledson's email. She suggests she sends her letter of support to all the committee members. I was rather taken aback to see against each address that the political persuasion of each committee member. But as regards Councillor Frost, she says he's our local councillor who during elections came out publicly in support of the application, which means he may not be able to vote, but would be good if he could make the other members conservative. So I don't know whether Councillor Frost was able to vote on this. I'd also just like to say, I've seen this email today. It's underneath the original. I'm pretty astonished that no one in the administration followed this up, because obviously we're here to determine planning decisions on planning merits and material planning considerations rather than political motivation. But I simply raise this because we've witnessed email. I saw this reference to Councillor Frost, so I leave it to the chair as Councillor Frost has to say about it. Thank you.
Right, it's up to the individual councillor to declare an interest. If they wish to. It's not for us to say to councillors, you've got to declare an interest. So it's up to the individual councillor to do that. So that's where I'm leaving it.
I see.
And that's why I asked the question, does anyone want to reason?
Thank you, John. I should say that I brought this attention to modules around a month ago. There's been some communication between us, and it's a fairly it's case but I'm satisfied on the right side. The right.
That's fine, thank you, Councillor Frost. Minutes, is you happy with last time's minutes? Right, so do the chair for announcements. So we'll now move on to planning application DA 2017-0826 Fifield. To start. Thank you, Justin.
Before I begin, I do want to draw attention to members' representations. They're not formally been submitted to you, but I do believe that 2 documents are being submitted to all members. One is a letter from the practitioners themselves, and the second document is a response from the local highway authority. But as all members received a copy of this, there's not a necessity for me to give you a copy again. And secondly, I'll apologise in advance for the lengthy introduction. However, I do feel that, for the new members especially, all the details regarding this particular case do need to be presented, and all members need to be put forward before you arrive at a decision, whatever that decision may be tonight. In terms of the application side, the site does form an agricultural field south of Woodford Road and east of Church Street itself. The land rises from west to east, as well as from south to north, and the highway level of Church Street is approximately 4 metres lower than the proposed development area. Non-metal views are available from west of Church Street towards Woodford House and vice versa. An historic stone retaining wall separates the site from the highway and forms an important feature of the street scene. On Woodford Road, well-established tree hedgerow party partially screens the site. However, it is acknowledged that this screen is introduced during the winter season, and more so by the development. Dwellings are likely below some existing biofield centre located northwest of the site. An application initially sought outline consent for the construction of 90 houses and a new medical centre. A viability assessment was submitted in support of the application. The assessment indicated that an annual provision of land and financial contribution of 1.25 million for construction of the surgery, 90 dwellings was required. The viability assessment was subject to consideration by an independent consultant on behalf of the local planning authority, and it concluded that 78 dwellings was required.
Is there a present, sorry, Sean? There is a music outside, and if you hear me, it's rather disturbing. I don't think I'm the only one. In the notes,
That's where it's coming from.
Yeah.
It's overstrong.
yes, thank you, because I'm sorry for that. It's outside.
The independent consultants have concluded that the 78 dwellings would be possible to provide 10% affordable housing, be self-compliant, and also be Section 106 compliant in terms of all contributions. The original application also sought 2 means of access, with access proposed on both Woodford Road and Church Street. Strong concerns were raised by officers with regards to the proposed part demolition of the wall within Church Street to accommodate the proposed access, and also the significant degree of engineering works which were required to ensure that access will meet county highway road standards. And with regard to his conclusion and concerns, the application was revised, and now only seeks planning.
Chairman, sorry, school councillor. Sorry, it's got too much time as well. It's yeah. Sixty-second minutes to stop this because I don't think we can stop the public from
standing outside.
But they've got.
Did we check the windows and set over there? Did we check the other? Did we check?
Just as I've got a megaphone there.
Yeah.
Security.
Yeah, it's a.
Yeah.
Perhaps they should say that.
Could you speak?
I try to speak as loud as we can, but I'm not shouting at everybody. I don't know, contact with whoever's got access to.
The thing is, when you start to tune, your voice doesn't.
That's kind of thing.
With that going on it. Right, I'll tell you, we'll stop for 5 minutes to find out what the candidate outside.
Thank you.
After that, just we'll carry on.
Yeah.
And can I get some stop? It's just got 10 past, so we won't start again till 16, 17 minutes past 5, okay? I think it's a good idea if you started again.
Yes, please.
So-
Okay. East of Church Street, and rises from west to east as well as from south to north. The highway along Church Street is approximately 4 meters lower than the proposed development area. Right views are available from western Church Street towards Woodford House and vice versa. Storage stone retaining wall separates the site from the highway and forms an important feature of the street scene. From the Woodford Road, well-established tree and hedgerow planting partially screens the site. However, it's acknowledged that this screening would be substantially reduced during the winter season, and more so by the development. Dwellings are likely close to existing viable surgery located northwest of the site. An application initially sought outline consent for the construction of 90 houses and a new medical centre. A viable assessment was submitted in support of the application. The application assessment indicated that to enable provision of land and financial contribution of 1.25 million for the construction of the surgery, 90 dwellings was required. The viability assessment was subject to consideration by the independent consultant on behalf of the local planning authority, and it was advised that 78 dwellings was required. The independent consultant concluded that with 78 dwellings, it was possible to provide 10% affordable housing, be self-compliant, and also be compliant in section 106 contributions. The original application sought 2 means of access to be improved, with access proposed both Woodford Road and Church Street. Strong concerns were raised by officers with regards to the proposed demolition of stone wall on Church Street to accommodate proposed access and the significant degree of engineering work which would be required to ensure access that meets highway standards. As regards to these concerns, the application was revised, and now the application seeks consent for construction of 78 dwellings, a new medical centre, and access only from Woodford Road. Pedestrian access is indicated on the right code to the proposed site to the new medical centre. Particular drawings have been submitted to illustrate how developments may be accommodated on the site. The remaining matters of layout, appearance, landscaping and scale are still reserved. Some members will report that the application was presented before planning committee on the 15th of January 2020, but it was resolved to defer the application to allow officers to negotiate further on outstanding concerns in respect of securing the proposed medical centre and necessary highway mitigation measures as advised by the local highway authority. During that debate, planning committee members requested information and action on the following matters. 1. Details of the scale, appearance and layout of the landscape related to the proposed medical centre. In effect, provide full details of the medical centre to be considered at this stage rather than being reserved for future consideration. 2. More descriptive details on the financial cost of delivering such a medical centre and regards to these particular details. 3. Whether the proposed contribution of 1.25 million will be sufficient to enable the delivery of the proposed medical centre in its entirety and in perpetuity. 4. If additional funding is required, the proposed source of additional funding and the certainty of its provision. 5. To determine the level of occupation of the proposed dwellings to allow the financial contributions to be delivered in full or in part to deliver the surgery in a timely manner. 6. To consideration by the owner as to whether or not the land may be gifted to the community to ensure that site provides community use in perpetuity, including details of how this could be gifted. There is a certain impact of the developments on the highway and to secure actually mitigate impacts as agreed by the highway authority, and aim to be the time for implementation and the build out of highway mitigation measures. If those matters could be negotiated to a satisfactory level of officers, and the detailed conditions in the section 106 to secure these matters and other contributions would be included in any subsequent report that was duly presented to planning committee. Since the resolution, the segmented countryside local to the Daventry has been adopted and MPPS material consideration has also been revised. report before members, therefore have regard to these development plan changes and also have regard to the requests for plan until 15th of January. I want to first look at each of the elements separately before looking at the case or nature of development. First and foremost, in respect to the medical centre, it's undisputed by officers and the applicants that the site is outside the confines of the village. And as such, as a proposal as a whole, that is contrary to policies. Policy RA6 provides that the only forms of development that will be supported in open countryside, and this one of those forms of development includes community uses, the scale, the location, and has an impact on the character, beauty, and tranquility of that location. In this case, the proposed medical centre is not necessarily a community use, but it is acknowledged that it is an important local service. The planning statement submitted in support of the application provides that the existing medical facility is currently 60% undersized, having regard to its patient list, which is in excess of 8,000. Document states that without the provision of improved facilities, the surgery of necessarily close to patient list requiring all new residents to travel elsewhere for local health services, to the possible closure in the future. It's the officer's view that the proposed surgery would not be a community facility which is controlled by a public body. The land and building will remain within private ownership, and future retention of the site for the purposes currently sought will be dictated by the owners. Equally, based on the information submitted to date, officers are not wholly convinced that the local service in sport is under threat of closure. The evidence submitted indicates the current facility is in fact well used and seek improvements to the services available for the growing list, which is far beyond the parish and immediate adjoining villages. The Commons NHSCCG support the provision of the new medical centre, while acknowledging that the proposed residential element cannot be absorbed by existing practice without financial contributions towards the primary health care. Comments received from the CQC confirm that there are no plans to close the surgery and advises we would need to be satisfied that the premise presented a significant risk to patient safety in line with our published risk assessment process before we pursue this type of action. Nevertheless, the existing medical centre remains to be an essential local service which have regard to the policies and the local and the FPPA as material consideration should be permitted to modernise, and this provision would enhance the sustainability of the village. Obviously, alongside the surgery, we also have the provision of the 78 houses. Again, it's undisputed by both the applicants and the officers that the site lies outside the confines of the village. The Planning Commission owns the residential development, which includes the reuse and conversion of existing buildings essential for the purpose of rural businesses, the replacement of existing dwellings which are exceptional quality or innovative design, the optimum use of heritage assets, the reuse of redundant or disused buildings that lead to environmental improvement or affordable housing exception sites. It's considered that the proposed housing element of the application will not meet any of these requirements. So overall, look at the principle of the development. Officers consider the principle of the proposed medical centre would be supported, but the proposed dwellings would be conscious of prevailing development plan policies. We can move on to the impacts in terms of heritage, landscape and character. Development plan policies do seek to ensure that proposals reinforce local character and distinctiveness and have regard to the impacts of proposed heritage assets and landscape. And policies together with the FPPF requires that any harm to heritage assets should be weighed against the public benefits. The site was subject to previous appeals of residential development, which have been refused and upheld on appeals. The planning inspector concluded in the most recent appeal that the proposal would involve developments aimed at construction, which is unacceptable in principle. Furthermore, due to the location of the appeal site, its position in relation to the village and the form of the proposed development, the proposal has an unacceptable effect on its character and appearance of the locality. These matters are sufficient to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the proposal, including the fact that the council is unable to demonstrate a 5-year land supply onto people housing sites. I've also taken into account the benefits of the proposal development, however, our funds are insufficient to outweigh the harmful effects of the proposal. It's important to note that this appeal decision upheld the views of all previous refusals regards the development in this site and the impact on the form and character of the village. Furthermore, the decision to dismiss the appeal was included in more favourable policy petitions, where the council is unable to demonstrate the 5-year land supply and there was capacity in the 5-way junctions. There's been a substantial change since the determination of this appeal in the character area that would leave officers with an alternative conclusion about the adverse impacts, which would be highly visible from well-used public highways and footpaths. And the last concern cited by the list buildings officer and the landscape officer, together consideration cited within the plan inspector's 3 appeal decisions, dismissing the application for housing site. It's considered proposed housing would undoubtedly result in harm to the form and character of the village. At the respectful planning committee during the previous planning committee meeting, detailed proposed medical centre have been submitted, and whilst the application still remains to be outlined, these details provide some indication as to the intended design, scale, and size of the proposed building. The proposed medical centre stands situated on modern single-story building, fronting Woodford Road, with a bit of car parking to the rear. The site will not extend beyond existing dwellings in Marketplace, nor intrude significantly into the agricultural field. A significant bubble remains between historic buildings on Church Street, and the use of the church spire will not be impeded. As such, any impact on heritage assets and the landscape used in and out of the village will be less than substantial. Having regard to these considerations, it's not to assume that the proposed benefits of the medical centre alone would be outweighed by the harm to the heritage asset and the form and character of the village. I can move on to the highway impacts. The main plan policies require that there are safe and suitable access is achieved for all usual proposals. New developments would only be considered the necessary on- and off-site infrastructure that's required to support and to mitigate its impacts either in place or there is a reliable mechanism to ensure that it is delivered. The NPPF provides that development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there are unacceptable impacts on highway safety or the residual cumulative impact of road network would be severe. The application's plan requests a single access from Woodford Road, and in support of the application, a transport assessment was submitted. The application and the transport assessment were subject to consultation with the county highway judge at the time. During the previous meeting, planning committee members requested the impact of the proposal on the highway be ascertained and to agree to secure measures to satisfactorily mitigate the impacts with the highway authority. Further information has been submitted and subject to consultation with the local highway authority. The comments received advise that the local highway authority may maintain its firm held objection to the application and concludes that the mitigation measures being presented would have an unacceptable impact on highway safety and would result in severe cumulative impact on road network at this junction, which is already over capacity. And regards to concern by the highway authority to consider the matters of highway and transport have yet to be satisfactorily addressed. And have regards to the severity of impacts and material consideration and the material consideration, applications should be refused on highway grounds. It's acknowledged the applicant's indication of willingness to enter into a lease agreement to secure the proposed 5-way junction improvements, but it's necessary that such agreements are explicit as to the extent of the works agreeable. The advice received to date from the highway authorities that the proposed mitigation measures are not agreeable. In fact, the latest comments received from the highway authority say the applicant has been unable to satisfy the local highway authority that the latest signal junction process either safe or likely to reduce congestion. In fact, the opposite is true. The applicant has failed to prove that their processes are safe and time efficient, and they've failed to supply all the information requested by the local highway authority. In the absence of the highway matters being addressed, a full set of conditions and a draft legal agreement not be concluded as requested by planning committee from the previous meeting. Now, it's accepted that enabling development may bring about the delivery of the medical centre. I can explain to members what the purpose of enabling development is and how it's defined. That's private development, which would be unacceptable in plan terms, but the fact that would bring about public benefits sufficient to justify it being carried out, and which would otherwise not be achieved. While it's normally the last resort, it's an established and useful tool which communities don't secure the long-term future of heritage assets, but also public benefits. Provided that members are satisfied that the balance of public advantage in doing so has been gained. The public benefits are paid for by the value added to the land as a result of granting planning permission for development. The current application advises that the proposed medical centre cannot be delivered without 78 houses. The report has demonstrated that the proposed relative contract policy and results in harm to the heritage asset and the form and character of the village, which has been identified in previous appeals, with much smaller housing schemes. Furthermore, matters related to highway concerns and impacts remain unresolved. Information submitted in support of the application advises that proposed roads are necessary enabling development, which without the proposed medical centre cannot be delivered. The principle that enabling development prevents development from making a fair and reasonable return, but the local planning authority has to determine what is a fair and reasonable return. In this case, the viability assessment was submitted was subject to review, treat the level of enabling development, 78 votes, was justified to deliver the site and financial contribution towards the construction of the medical centre. With the pros of enabling development by the policy which fund 40% affordable housing, the proposed under provision does allow the remaining policy compliant contributions to be delivered. Matter for consideration really is whether the public benefit has been demonstrated in the vision of the site and the financial contribution of 1.25 billion towards the construction of a new medical centre, which would outweigh the harm identified within the report. Officers recognise the existing medical centre again provides a local important medical service which is public benefit and the current existing buildings and size. It's also acknowledged that a new medical centre will allow the continued acceptance of patients which may need to travel further medical needs. However, this medical service is not currently under threat of closure, but rather necessarily closes lists of new patients if the application was approved. The planning statement advises that the current buildings are able to accommodate the needs of existing patients and improvements are necessary, and there's a possibility that the surgery may close in the future, which of course will have a negative impact on the community. It's accepted that the enabling development would provide a site and a financial contribution. And information has been submitted which advises that 50% of the financial contribution, i.e. 50% of the 1.25 million, will be made prior to commencement of the housing development, and then 50% will be made at the earlier point, or either 9 months from the commencement of the housing development or an occupation of the 10th dwelling. Additional information has also been submitted to suggest that an additional £800,000 would be available subject to a mortgage application. The application will be submitted in outline only. Details of the medical centre related to the scale, appearance and layout have been submitted, and this has allowed the impact of the building to be set having regard to the setting of heritage assets, landscape, form and character of the village. However, no financial costs of construction, which will be subject to these details, have been submitted in accordance with point 2 of the members' requests. And as such, there is some uncertainty as to the cost of delivering the medical centre in its entirety. Officers consider that these details are necessary to demonstrate that the enabling development and the contributions proposed will be sufficient to deliver the improved facility. In the absence of these details, officers are concerned as to the certainty of the proposed enabling development would indeed deliver the construction of the new improved medical centre. When it comes to the enabling development, and the way the funds delivered by an enabling development only form part of the overall cost, applicants must provide information related to how the remaining funds for the cost of the scheme will be delivered in the time scale. If there's insufficient funding to deliver the complete cost of the scheme, then the applicant will not be able to demonstrate the objectives of paragraph 202, which relate to neighbour development, and the case of the neighbour development has not been demonstrated. Information received on the 30th of November indicated the site owners agreement to slightly passed to council, then given to the applicant, which is restrictions deemed appropriate, and to ensure that the proposal remains community use only. The site will then remain private ownership. And regarding these considerations, it's the opposite view that the public advantage of provision of the site and financial contributions not demonstrate to outweigh the impact of the proposal as a whole, with regards to impact on landscape, form and character, and unacceptable impacts on the highway safety, which would result in compromise of the highway safety, but also severe cumulative impacts as well. Overall, the proposal would provide the site and financial contribution to the construction of a new medical centre, which is necessary for the current medical centres to continue to accept new patients and deliver an improved service for existing patients. While the application remains with outline only, indicative details are presented with regards to the scale, appearance, and layout of the medical centre, and officers consider these demonstrate that while there is some harm to the form and character of the village, this harm would be less substantial. There are concerns that the proposed medical centre and associated vehicles will add to the overcapacity of the five-way roundabout and compromise highway pedestrian safety. However, it's arguable that the majority of the patients already use this route, and there will only be new patients that would overcapacity. Furthermore, traffic movements associated with the medical centre use are rarely concentrated, but will be spread throughout the day. It's therefore accepted that while the proposed medical centre use would add to the local traffic movements, this use alone would not necessarily be of such significance to warrant the junction movements at five-way roundabouts. With respect to the medical centre, then, it's considered that impacts as identified would be outweighed by community benefit that result in the new medical centre. Equally, though, it's been clearly demonstrated that proposed housing will be conscious of the prevailing policies of the development plan. Having regards to the previous decisions in smaller housing schemes, the proposed housing would extend substantially beyond the confines of the village and impede against open use in and out of the village, with harms to the heritage assets and the landscape, the extent of which cannot be fully identified yet. This evidence of the proposal, combined with the new medical centre, would result in significant impacts on the Woodford Road and the five-way junction, which needs to be mitigated, without which would have unacceptable impacts on highway safety and severe impacts on the road network. Overall, it's recognised that proposed housing will enable the delivery of the site and financial contributions towards the new medical centre, which, if constructed, would be a benefit to the community. However, without details related to the costings of the proposed medical centre, there still remains uncertainty that an able development sought with additional funding will deliver sufficient funds to construct a new medical centre that will both accommodate the existing growing number of patients and include a service that will be achievable. If demonstrated to be deliverable and subject to implementation of highway mitigation measures, the proposed medical centre would bring about benefits to much improved service to both existing and new patients. This is a consideration which weighs heavily in favour of the application. However, in the absence of the information, the harm caused by the housing developments, the form and character that appear to the locality, together with the unacceptable impacts of highway safety, these are matters which weigh against the application. And on balance, is that the harm outweighs the benefit, and in this case, the application recommends for refusal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have lived in the village borough for 14 years and my family use the medical centre regularly. The applicant and his supporters suggest that if the planning application is rejected, the medical centre will close. However, to provide to support this assertion, I have asked our MP to provide the evidence and he has been unable to do so. Given the absence of any evidence, let me provide some facts. The medical centre was built in 81 and extended in 1990. The building is 91, not old. It is attractive, clean and functional. It's not luxurious, it doesn't need to be. The medical centre has about 8,300 patients and continues to take on new patients. As with many businesses, the surgery has embraced hybrid working practices, and the increase in virtual appointments will continue to ease demand on physical space. Whenever I call the medical centre at 8 AM, I am offered an appointment the same day. The medical centre is rated good by the Care Quality Commission. I agree. GPs receive approximately £155 per patient per annum, an annual revenue in the region of £1.3 million for the medical centre, with additional income from dispensing medicines. The average pay for each GP working in the Byfield Medical Centre was £96,500 in 2019 to 20. This was the average pay for 2 full-time GPs and 3 part-time GPs. Back in 2016 to 17, the average pay was £53,000. These facts show that the medical centre is in good health, is serving its patients well, and is an increasingly profitable business for the GPs. These facts are at odds with the scaremongering cries that save our surgery. The medical centre provides a good service to its patients and a very good source of income to its GPs. It does not need to be saved, and there is no reason to close. Let's be very clear, this planning application is about money. It's a commercial opportunity for the applicant, plain and simple. The applicant does not live in the village and has no interest in it beyond getting planning permission so that his greenfield can be sold off to a developer and concreted over. His previous applications have been knocked back, and the tie-up with the medical centre is nothing more than a flag of convenience to help him pocket millions. The commercial opportunism of the 2 GP partners, neither of whom live in the village, is simple. More patients, more money. The scaremongering of our Save Our Surgery campaign has garnered some support from a vocal minority. It is heavy on fear, but light on facts. It is a charade. The Byfield Parish Council sees through the noise and represents the majority of the village. The planning application should be rejected. If it isn't, our thriving village will see its character change with 20% more houses being added overnight. Byfield will become a town rather than a village. We will suffer more traffic, pollution, and safety issues. Our wildlife will suffer with us. Please protect our rural community and the environment by rejecting this application.
Thank you. Ask any questions of the taking that as a no. Thank you. Next speaker is Roger Peach. You've got 3 minutes, sir.
Well, really directly opposite the field, more likely is to draw it. As a garden field left to mature to proliferate, and for us all to endure and still do so. The colony was a major factor in its moving to the village 30 years ago, as it laid open and accessible for all its wildlife to play open taking, living in the house, living camping, with a slightly shortcut to the cover and playing the pits. It's its own ecosystem, it's got its own open space, building in the itself, and it stands to be destroyed forever in an army of players. It's a bit of help to swap. Of safety allowance. The climate realisation we all know too fast and is more likely never devastating ways. And yet what happens is an opportunity to do something right. Concerted, concentrating accidents from Dobbs Hill to the last building exiting Byfield, a couple of 100 metres. The car walked through that one. Fortunately, they were all right. A young lad knocked off his bike by a car, and I only know about that one this morning. Countless upon countless of near misses. Gets off the bus, crosses the road, and gets killed. Right in front of my house. What happened? This proposed entrance. It's my candid opinion, it's one of the strips sees more throughput of traffic in sections of the A361 within the village. Now, to stick a traffic junction right in the middle of this section beggars belief. The screech of tires, the blood-curdling screams of a young girl whose sister has just been hit is something I never used to be able to get. This small section of highway has become a vicious killer, and it remains so. The fumes and the noise is concentrated here, and it's relentless, day in, day out. Now is very much the time to preserve and nurture our field for a far better use. COVID has made everyone more appreciative of the outdoors and its benefits. The proposed location and size of this development is not in the best interests of anyone's safety, at anyone's expense, or profit. The linkage of this latest housing venture to a GP surgery to add weight to an application is not and should never be a reason for it to be considered. Surgery is a private business, and as such, the financial gains of worth millions to both parties. If Boyle's medical centre can't manage its own problems and decide they want to close, then the opportunity will immediately remain for another GP with better management to take over it. Basically, don't let this fall down.
Management committee, any questions? No. Thank you, sir. John Gibb, Highfield Parish Council. Got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, councillors. You are not being asked to make a decision tonight on whether or not to close Byfield Medical Centre. That rests with the partners of the business. This development first came to our attention 5 years ago. Since then, the practice has continued its good work, serving the community, continued to accept new patients, and has been rated good in its inspections. No one's forcing them to close. I think it's policy RO2 which allows developments where it is needed to support or retain a local service, where that local service has been demonstrated to be under threat. But there are no known plans to close the surgery down. The partners and owners of the business are not under notice of eviction, and neither the NHS England nor the Quality Care Commission has ordered the medical centre to shut. So tonight, your decision is about, forgive me for saying it, it's about the entirety of the application, the majority of which is about housing, ensuring that it meets planning policy and will on balance meet improve the lives of people living in Byfield. The Parish Council was fully engaged on this application and always sought to get the best outcome for our village and ensure that the opinions and thoughts of everyone are fairly fully considered. We have come to the conclusion that the scheme in its entirety is not viable and will not benefit our community. As the officer's report makes clear, the application does not meet the planning policy RA2 on scale, location, impact on heritage assets. All previous applications to build on this site have been refused, and refusal upheld in review. It will create a nightmare tangle of traffic lights around 5 ways, including vehicles producing pollution, light, noise, and fumes on 5 different roads in our community. And as you know, the local highway authority has maintained its firmly held objections to the application and concluded that the proposed mitigation being presented would have an unacceptable impact on highway safety and result in a severe cumulative impact on the road network at this junction, which is already over capacity. The landowner will give the applicant millions in land and cash and has offered via a dormant property company to fund highway improvements, although these remain unagreed and so therefore not properly costed. This dormant business has not operated, not submitted accounts, and has a share capital of £100. How will we be confident the money will be provided from the highways plans implemented? Since 2017, the application has altered considerably. The medical centre has shrunk from 2 stories to 1, and proposed additional services and facilities have been withdrawn, including dentistry, X-ray, ultrasound, and file storage. Although the number of houses has reduced from 90 to 70, the development site itself has shrunk even more, so increasing housing density and leaving a slice of ground for a further application in the future. Byfield Parish Council would welcome a new, bigger, better medical centre, but sadly, this scheme is not the right one to implement.
Thank you. Mr. Committee, anyone would like to ask?
Yes, so you're also chairman of Byfield Parish.
So,
And you say that the village is not for the place. How did you come to that conclusion? Did you have a parish meeting? Did you have a presentation? How can we gauge the level of satisfaction, whatever side you are in the village?
Initially, 5 years ago, or so, Dr. Bone, who was one of the senior partners, and met with the parish council with the architects, outlined those plans to us. There was then a meeting in the village where we had, I think, 120 or so villagers present. And there was a great deal of support for it. When the planning application, at that point, for example, the planning application had 30% affordable housing needs, the initial proposal. When it went, when the application arrived here with your officers, all of that had been stripped out. We argued, and the arguments were one, that there should be an element of affordable housing there. Since then, we've not really had any contact with the medical centre. We've had a number of meetings in the village, and we have worked very carefully through every single document, and they're pretty intelligent. The transport analysis is hard work, but we've had some people who have worked through those with us. And although we understand the requirement centre, the point is this one is not at risk, and so therefore we, on balance, do not believe that this scheme is viable for us. The traffic issues and the impact on that site are the things that are driving us. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Thank you. Jerry Rowe?
Thank you. Chairman, councillors, members of the public and fellow parish councillors, I'd like to start by thanking the Daventry planning team for their diligence, time and efforts, working with people in highways and the Life Surgery team in bringing this application to this stage before the committee. This application site is not in the distance. It affects almost all of our parishioners, about 4,000 people, and has given rise to the most debate and concern locally that we've ever seen. We never had so many people come to planning meetings came last time, and I'm sure were it not for code restrictions and concerns, there will be many more here today. We know this planning application is not supported by Byfield Parish Council, and we're sorry that due to restrictions on pharmacies, a medical centre could not be built in Woodford House. Elsewhere in the country, there are other similar developments which have been approved. I'd like to give you an example. The Glebe surgery in Stonington in West Sussex was funded under the 106 agreement. The development there gave rise to many of the same questions. Similarly, it had support from users of the centre, but not the immediate local council. However, with the agreement in place, it's been built. They decided there would be less harm in providing a medical centre than having the houses built. It was better to take an opportunity to provide for the local community, because how else would it ever happen? The patients there now have a state-of-the-art medical centre, which is providing medical service and facilities at the heart of the community. The provision of a replacement medical centre sits within the new National Integrated Care System, which involves local councils, NHS and other partners coming together to make provision for health and social needs through community posts centred in the community. These benefits are exactly what our rural community needs. We know Northamptonshire has money issues. How else will we be provided with a new hub? This is what we're asking you for. Please be brave and allow the 8,500 people who need this medical facility built to have it. The young mothers, the local workers, the residents, the ill people, the frail or elderly need local medical provision. Disabled people in this area particularly need the access and parking. All the additional people living in developments in Woodford House who live there because this planning committee, although not people actually in this room, agreed to build over 350 new houses there outside the village boundary. They're there now, they have to have provision. They should not have to travel to Daventry or Banbury. They need a facility in the heart of the community. If it doesn't come from this application, where will the money come from to provide it? We all know it just won't happen. Please, please give the local people what they're asking for. help the current excellent medical people we have to make provision in a building fit for purpose, which we can all be proud of. Make this your legacy as the committee, planning committee of 2022.
Say the first name. Sorry, councillor.
Yes, thank you. Have you got no GP provision in Woodford now? Because I understand years ago there was some part-time provision.
The current GPs occasionally did a surgery over in Woodford, but it's not. It's just literally a doctor sat in a room able to see people. It isn't.
Anybody else? No? Thank you. Right, we'll now move to ward councillors. These ward councillors have got back to. Sorry, councillor Kevin.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak. Surgery, as we know from the information presented, is operating at dangerous levels of overcapacity. It wasn't built for the amount of patients it is. It is only through good management that it's retained the service within the village as it is now. What this evening's debate is really about is the balance of harm against benefits, which brings in the element of subjectivity. The report before us is a fair summary of the positive and negatives of the application. It is for you members to decide which side the scale falls on. Officers have concluded that the scales are on the side of harm and the application is unacceptable for three main reasons. I would argue against those reasons cited and that they do not outweigh the detrimental effect, but are a gain to the community, and the scale should fall on the side of approval. Yes, the housing requirement for the Daventry rural area has been met. Let's get back to the three reasons. However, the infrastructure of the medical services has not been met. This application would therefore be an enabler for retaining infrastructure within a rural community, i.e. NHS services. Yes, there is much debate over the highways. This evening, that the evidence is that the junction at the moment is not fit for purpose. We've not been able to reach agreement on what a solution is. I myself have asked highways to a meeting who have not turned up. What is on the offer table is an offer of financial assistance to try and get some agreement to a resolution for that junction. This application would therefore be an enabler for improved highways safety. Finally, and I bet you can't guess what I'm going to say next, this application could also be an enabler for economic, social and environmental gains. I find it so frustrating that economic growth is often seen at odds with the environment. Yes, our core responsibility is to ensure the natural environment is managed. However, this application underpins economic activity and well-being in the boundary area of the practice. There have been, as mentioned, hundreds of houses built. We need to ensure that the infrastructure is there for it. It's critical. We need to address the requirement of the additional NHS services required. Woodford, as we spoke earlier, used to have a surgery there. It's only through good management and restriction in other areas that services are carried on at Barwood. It is not sustainable in its current form. I then ask that the new West Midlands Council become an enabler of infrastructure within a rural community and grant this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Sorry.
Councillor Gills, could you give some detail about the dangerous levels that service operating at the moment?
Well, I know the building was originally only built for about 4,000 patients. It's currently operating at 8,000 patients. It's the good management, we're looking for alternate ways of provision that enabled it to carry on for the past few years. I should admit that my day job is in the NHS as well, and we are all facing this dilemma of needing more space and finding ways of, developing.
Dangerous is quite a strong word, so I just wondered.
Well, dangerous, 8,000, it's about 4,000 patients, they're serving 8,000 patients.
It's under pressure, certainly, yeah.
Well, I would say 50% increase in what it should be. But 100% side increase is the dangerous.
Just one other question, we haven't mentioned any threat of it being closed, so you what to do, do you have any comment on that?
Well, I understand it's not down to me to say whether I think will close, but my understanding is, as the officer has read out, that it will close its list and could, as I've just said, it's managed for these years over capacity. It can't go on at over capacity, so I would put a bet on the fact that in the future it could close without any business will close without development and investment.
Councillor Humphries, you see, CQ Commission said it's not under threat. It's actually in the document.
The question for clarification, I wanted to have, Secretary.
Thank you.
Could I just come back on that? The CQC, and I would declare an interest as CQC inspector. It is not down to the CQC as to whether a surgery remains open or closed. It is down to the GPs. So. As an inspector, I think.
CQC does not have the power to require practice to close the premises, but this will be the last resort and something we undertake likely. It's on page 2021.
Do not have the power.
So I'm not ready to all, but it's there, it's quite clear what powers they've got. Anybody else? Thank you. So we'll move on to David Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. Interesting discussion so far this evening. This is about people, this is about patients. Yes, we've got policy which dictates X, Y, and Z, but we're going for, over the past 2 years where we are all for the ICS, the integrated care system, and that aims to provide provision in the locality where people actually live. And how can we, with any conscience, move forward and go against officers' advice with the risk? Yes, we don't know that this will close, but that's not in my gift. That's at the end of the day, that's the doctors who run the surgery. What we do know is, at the moment, it's over capacity, moving forward and doing a pretty good job by all accounts from the I speak to. And we will make sure that continues. We don't want to make a mistake now. Yeah, the enabling development, it pros and cons, it sways from one thing to the other. But this is about people, and it's about the patients, it's about provision of care in the community. And that's the most important thing. And one day, all of us will need that care. One day, there's a good chance we might all be able to jump in our car and zoom off to Daventry through the 5 ways roundabout, turning left, or turning right to go to Daventry. We may not be able to get onto a bus and do that, but we may well be cobble along to our local surgery. It's really important. I'm passionate and keep it. Yes, the pros and cons, we can argue those all day, but the reality is we all need a good healthcare system delivered in our locality. And I ask you, this evening, committee, to take that on board. The arguments from a policy perspective, we can't counter that, but what we do is actually take an overview that says the right thing to do is to allow enabling development, build a new surgery, which will be allegedly provide whole services in the community, and everybody will benefit. The uplift in traffic, we'll see that anyway. We've got HS2 going on, we've got all sorts of development going on. The 5 days round that's not ideal. We can't do surgery on that. It is what it is. It was there long before most of the development we've seen there. I asked you to go against officers' advice this evening and
anyone would like to ask the council some question? No. Thank you, councillor. Now move on to Rachel Johnson, please. Got 3 minutes.
Thank you, councillors, for giving the 8,300 patients of Vital Health Centre the opportunity to be heard. As speaking to the chair of the Patient Participation Group, we are volunteers from across almost 100 square miles of your rural constituency. The PPG hear both perspectives from patients and more detail on the practical challenges of delivering healthcare in the current building. I'm also a biophobia for 10 years and have wide contact with the more vulnerable in the village, for whom accessing the surgery's care is vital, as I am one of the founders of Biophobic Neighbours. These negotiations have been going on a long time, and we're past the point of could have, should have, would have. So to address whether the balance of public good has been met, please reflect pragmatically on these common sense priorities. In short, the patient's needs are accessibility in all its forms, getting to and into the building, and access to appointments. We need more space for more availability of doctors, nurses, and clinics. The current location for providing this healthcare is designed for less than half the patient numbers, and it is an out-of-date, undersized, rented building on a slope, which can either be made larger or made more accessible. A purpose-built, covenant-protected medical facility will increase access and give long-term viability to the practice. Without it, assuming we could get on doctors' lists elsewhere, it would be more and further journeys, and you know the public transport challenges your constituents face. Obviously, in an ideal world, no field could ever be built upon, but that will not solve anything. Housing as a resource in a new centre is a price many life builders will willingly accept. In fact, we can see positive benefits, not least the affordable housing, flow of employment, pupils for the village school, and customers for all our amenities, the shops, the hall, our clubs and activities. The debate till now has secured some big improvements to the scheme, and there are valid concerns on traffic. However, there is a pot of money from the development of the council to decide on how they prefer to deal with this, and now is not the time to let perfect be the enemy of the good. It is now you who are charged with protecting the health and vitality of your community. Unfortunately, this application does both. The health, vitality and the self-sufficiency of a large portion of your constituents is in your hands. We are the equivalent of the third of Daventry, and 820 letters and the support outside can give you comfort that you are doing the right thing by approving this. The voice of the patients is overwhelmingly that this is in the public good. Finally, you can't separate out the medical centre and the housing. The two together is what makes this work for all of us. So, direct the funding to your preferred highway solution, specify the covenant wording, dictate the look and the landscaping, but please, no more delay, let's just get on with it. Thank you, I'm happy to take questions.
I will ask maybe one question, and I hope you take it the right way. You represent the patient, so we have a different way of delivering medicine, because when I'm in the market level, I couldn't see my doctor for 2 years. He didn't accept anybody, and everybody have learned how to do that. Do you think what we have learned is good? And when we are working for doctor, we make a different kind, because you represent a patient. Patient have learned maybe to do different things with a doctor and in different ways, like Zoom or things. Do you think we should take that into account?
I would just done a blended service all the way throughout. It was shut for as little time as possible. What we hear as patient participation group is people don't complain to us, but we do hear about it and we hear what has been complained about. And it's always appointments. How many appointments? We tried to change the system for a while, it caused uproar, and it's about access to it. So some people are happy with being able to speak to doctors and the appointment and the callbacks work really, really well. But other times you need to be seen, and often the call review says, come down later, we need to see this in our flesh. So absolutely, they're going to pull out the conversation about Woodford, that centre is basically, they have to send someone there to do the phone calls, because if they're in surgery, they're taking up the route to do the phone calls. So we all want a medical centre that's fit for purpose, and that includes a lot of my purpose as well. We want to live daily, getting them to the
down, I don't know if you've ever visited the thing, but it's absolutely illegal to get in and out of it. You can't park there. It's very difficult to get the older parking in there. Send the volunteers to do that, and it's very difficult. I would be thrilled with it.
Anybody else? Car park is 50%, so.
You can get in the car park at the top, and that's a lethal set of stairs down to the back. There's maybe 3, 4, but you'll just park on the corners of the road. And, you know, I'm guilty of it as well. If I'm keeping a restriction for me and my family, and there's a space, I'll throw myself in my car in there, so I'm running in and out. But then when the person comes, who literally has to hobble up the stairs or a long way up to get around, they can't park, and we will do it. It's human. It's very tricky to get in and out.
Thank you. Nobody else? No, thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Hatfield, please. So,
Hi, my name is Chris Hatfield, and I represent the landlord. The landlord will attend subsequent development will be party to a legally binding section 106 agreement that will secure the following benefits if you decide to grant planning consent for the scheme. Firstly, 1 acre of land gives and secure in perpetuity for a medical centre by restricted covenants to be imposed by your council. £140 million to contribute to the construction of the new surgery. 8 affordable homes, sale and section 106 contributions, fully as per your officer's report. We've also agreed an obligation to fully complete the signalisation of the Firebridge roundabout or pay your council £800,000 for your council to design and implement its own solution prior to commencement of development. The landlord owns GPs have tried without success over 2 years to meet and agree the design solution with the highways officers for this roundabout. We provided the best solution we can in the highway constraints. Whilst we accept the scheme is not fully compliant in terms of minimum standard, we're constrained by the existing land ownerships, and our consultants believe what is proposed will improve capacity. Most of the requirement for additional capacity comes from future anticipated traffic, which may or may not happen due to changing working patterns, and not the housing patterns itself, which would only have less than 2 cars per minute. As we've not been able to arrive at a highway solution despite our best efforts, we're offering to give £800,000 to your council to design and procure a solution in return, despite our consultants' advice that what we had designed would be effective. We acknowledge that this site is contrary to some plan policies, but believe this is truly an orderly development for a vital community asset. The officers cite in their report previous opinion inspector Scotland, meaning made on a purely residential scheme with a very different planning balance than you have here. This site is well screened and right immediately adjacent to the village. We believe the correct planning balance here is significantly positive, with the benefit of medical centre, level 6 and some contributions, affordable housing, and an improved junction, and policy concerns and any potential harm on the existing highway network, which in any event our highway consultant believes is overstated. The community's strong support remains for the schemes you heard and seen, and the landowner is fully committed to the maintenance development and will be legally bound by section 106 agreement. I hope therefore that you will not refuse this application as recommended, and instead recommend the application for approval with delegated powers to your officers to review appropriate planning conditions and section 106 provisions. Please remember this application is the only way to fund your medical centre and generate some junction improvement. Thank you for listening.
Any questions? No? No, so.
Dr. Rob RBG. This scheme is the only way to fund and enable a new medical centre in the village. Current medical centre is no longer fit for the village. The building doesn't allow us to accommodate all of our clinical staff, the numbers of which have increased since last meeting. We cannot increase the size of the current building, which is leased. Without this scheme, which will contribute 1.25 million of funds and an acre of land without charge, the current medical centre will close and members of the community will be forced to travel for their medical care. The scheme will also provide 8 affordable houses, 7 section 106 contributions of over £640,000, as per the Family Officer's report, and 78 new homes. Previously, GPs confirmed funding of the land and mortgage will enable the fund the construction of the new medical centre. The landowner has confirmed that they will transfer the land to the medical centre to the council. We can transfer this to GPs with a meeting binding restricted covenant, so it can be used for that purpose in perpetuity. The council will also have the planning authority and can use this role in the future to ensure the new medical centre remains as such. We have worked to agree a solution to the 5-way roundabout with your highways officers. Even though the scheme itself does not have a material impact on capacity of the junction, it's accepted that if projected traffic growth continues, then the current junction would be refrained. But this is the case with or without this development. When the scheme is approved, the majority of our patients won't have to use this junction as they will be travelling in the route course direction and will not have to cross the junction. The parking outside the surgery, the residents of Church Street complain that will also be eliminated. Even though this development does not cause problems, it's debatable whether future traffic will transpire due to changing working patterns. The applicants and landowner have agreed to fully fund a signalisation of the junction by either payment rate from the Daventry Council to work and take or undertaken by the developer prior to the residential development. We're confident the solution will provide significant increased capacity for the junction and improve safety. We've provided a full set section 106 heads of terms to the council and confirmation in writing from the landowners of what the medical centre land and contribution towards its construction. And we set for responsibility to create highways roundabout to include traffic signals. At the last committee meeting, you will recall that in the motion to defer, officers requested more information before being able to approve. This has been provided to the planning officer and also each councillor, and we hope therefore the council will approve the application. Thank you.
Yeah, I have. We've heard that the building is leased. Firstly, and it was over our previous doctor, I understand. Surely that previous doctor must understand the constraints that the doctors have got now. So is there no, he'd obviously want to keep that building, because if you move out that building, that building was purpose built. So what will happen with that building? And surely, would he not want to put a planning application in for just extending that medical centre?
Extend the medical centre on the current land that it's on. Because there is not the provision to do that. Equally, all the rooms do not fulfill modern standards because this is a 40-year-old building. I think, as was said here, front access is not great. I mean, it is on the slope, which for an infirm and stable patient is difficult. So it's basically, it's no longer fit for purpose.
Yeah, I do understand that, but obviously the way that the land falls, there's going to be a lot of digging out, I'd imagine. So is there no way that you could dig out back? I mean, obviously.
It's a small car.
I know, that's what I'm saying. There's no way that can be dug down and plants.
There's no way to extend the building.
Okay, so what would happen to that building?
I mean, that's up to the owner of the building. That's not, I mean, that is nothing to do with.
Okay.
Councillor.
Yes, so can I just go back to something you said in the opening, that the surgery closed if this proposal is agreed to. You also mentioned that in your letter to committee members, the chairs clarified earlier stating that the service not under threat of closure. Do you mean that it will close to new patients or would it physically shut?
Okay, I mean, I've been a GP there for 20 years now, and even when I was having my interview, there was talk from the doctors there that this building was kind of running out of steam, and the plan was at some point to get a new medical centre, and that was 20 years ago. With regards to closing, we have previously tried to close our patient list because of increasing demand. So since I've started there, the practice numbers have gone up and up. And on the two occasions we have tried to do that, the CCG have said, no, you can't close your list. So the patient numbers have gone up over the years, but also, even if the patient numbers have remained static, patient demand has significantly increased over the years. So it's not just patient numbers, it's actual contacts from patients. Sure. Obviously, working patterns have changed, and obviously we offer a mix of telephone, face-to-face, a little bit of Zoom. But a lot of things you have to see face-to-face. If someone's got abdominal pain, you can't examine them over a computer. So from a closure point of view, I mean, at the moment, we have been struggling. We lost a doctor back in October, we relocated. So we've been working at the busiest time of year with numbers down. Across the NHS, it's very difficult to attract doctors. And obviously, if you're in a surgery which is crumbling, then it is harder to attract new doctors into the surgery.
Sure.
Yeah,
Just like to come back on that.
I think it's important to provide some clarification there around this issue of closure or not closure. I think what the CQC is saying is that based on patient safety, they're not looking to close the surgery. However, that's a different matter from the doctors feeling that they're able to continue to operate to the standard they're doing within the current building. So there needs to be that distinction. They're not being forced to close by the CQC, but their office, the doctors feel that they want to be able to operate in a better way.
And also, when the CQC came to us last in 2019, they did agree that the building was not fit for purpose, but they did not want to close the surgery at that point. But obviously, as time goes on, patient numbers go up, demand goes up, the building gets open.
Anybody else want to ask no? Sure. You've heard quite a bit there. Would you like to come back on
There's a number of things raised, a lot of debates about the application. Now, in terms of the number of speakers, it's very emerging subject, and we do understand, particularly from the patient participation group, that they're the ones on the ground working, going out to see a lot of patients in their own time. Lots of us like through voluntary work as well. But I do want to draw attention to some of the points that have been made. With the Parish Council, draw attention to another medical centre that was approved elsewhere. This is not really comparable, really. We've got to look at each application on its merits based on our science circumstances. And we don't know the history of those sites or the impacts of the development on those sites, setting aside the housing impact itself, but now there's other impacts. This one, particular, we have significant highway impacts alongside the housing. Obviously, there's been some indication that the doctor's surgery is being to blame for the traffic. I think the highway authority made it quite clear in their comments. They've been very fair to say that if it was just the surgery, actually, that knowledge that a significant number of those patients already exist, a significant number of those traffic movements already exist, but it's not the surgery they have raised concerns about, which is the 78 houses. And I think in the document which all members received, they made that very, very clear. So the highway authority are not to blame for the surgery in this case. And then obviously there's been mention about the benefits to this proposal bring in terms of requiring fully complete signalised junction, in terms of the section 106 payments and still payments. These are not benefits, these are policy requirements, policy expectations and any development. And these requirements are there to mitigate the impacts of development. They're not additional benefits. there was will be required if you allow it to be unexpected.
Thank you. Right, I'll open it up now to the committee to ask questions.
Well, I will start. All of us have, we can understand the pro and the cons of the debate. And please, now, I would like to ask a technical question to our officer. So last time, when it was refused because we had some question about how far the progression will be supported. Now, the last speaker, the speaker before, said something that was a bit disturbing to me. That highway, because they haven't had an agreement yet with highway, and they said that it wasn't the fault of the applicant, it was the fault of highway. And is that the case? And also, I would like clarification on one point. The surgery will be 1.25 million to build, so that would be extra benefit or not from the development. And we have 800,000 of a loan. Now, is the 800,000 to finance the extracting of the library, or is the 800,000 to finance an highway system that we don't know how much it would cost yet?
It was first foremost I would say first and foremost, I need to correct the councillor, the application wasn't refused, the application was actually deferred. And it was deferred, subject to members getting more information. 800,000 you're referring to is in addition for the highway junction works. What the doctors have confirmed is that they're able to get an additional 800,000 on top of the 1.25 million to fund the construction of the land if it's needed. At the moment, we don't actually know how much it's actually going to cost to construct the surgery. So I refer back to enabling development and what enabling development actually means, and what is needed to demonstrate a case for enabling development. And in order to demonstrate the case for enabling development, we have to assess what the costs are in the first place. You have to assess what the costs are in terms of construction of the surgery and the time scale of construction, whether or not the time scale, if it's longer or shorter, would influence the costs. And then based on that cost, we have to say, what is enabling development and how much will it contribute towards those costs? So at the moment, we have gifting of the land, so that's free. We have 1.25 million plus 800,000 for the construction of the surgery, because it is the surgery that will be delivered for these contributions. So we have an indicative plan to show us the height, scale, appearance of the surgery, and that's enabled us to consider what impact it had on the landscape. What we don't have then is details of the costings. So we can't ensure at a particular time how much that surgery is going to cost. I did set out within the report the points which members wanted the applicants to consider in their previous committee. One of which was to the scale, appearance, layout, landscape related to the proposed medical centre. In effect, they wanted details of the medical centre to be considered at this stage rather than being reserved for consideration. Following that, there was more definitive details on the financial costing of delivering the medical centre and how to regard those details. Following that, whether or not the proposed contribution of 1.25 million would be sufficient to enable delivery of the proposed medical centre in its entirety and its perpetuity, and if then additional funding was required, the proposed source of additional funding and the certainty of its provision. I think it's fair to say that they have provided details of additional funding and the proposed source of additional funding and the certainty of that provision. So don't have at this stage any costings on that construction itself. And that's something to consider what those costs are, and then let us know what that time to build out will be as well. If we have those details, I think that would provide some certainty about whether or not enabling development have been demonstrated. Also, it would enable members to secure the delivery within a certain time scale as well.
Chair, sorry.
Sorry. I'm finished on that side, I haven't looked at the debate. I'd just like to, just bear with us, please. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Just going back to the details that were asked at the previous, whether professional judgment have been addressed. You just mentioned that the cost of delivering medical details, well, not the details, the cost of delivering the science was 1.25 going to be sufficient, but also just so I'm clear, it's the impacts of the higher mitigation at the time for implementing this as well. So the four things you feel.
If you like, I could just go through that list, if that can help its purpose. So
Yes, please.
So that's the 8 points that we asked about 2 years ago.
So obviously, when the application was deferred, there were 8 points which members spoke about, and we've just gone through the first 4 points. The 5th one was to determine the level of occupation of the post dwellings, which will allow the financial contributions to be delivered all in parts to ensure that delivery of the surgery in a timely manner. Obviously, we've had an indication already that 50% of that 1.25 million would be provided prior to commencement, and then the other 50% of the 1.25 million would be provided from 9 months of commencement prior to the 10th occupation. Consideration of by the landowner as to whether the land may be gifted to the community. This is a no, but they would allow the authority to impose restrictions on the actual land itself. So certain impacts on the Daventry highway as agreed to secure measures to satisfactorily mitigate the impacts to be agreed with the county highway authority. That has not been reached. Impacts have not been certain, and no measures have been agreed. And to agree the time of implementation and build out the higher mitigation measures. Clearly, as measures have not been agreed, we can't agree the time of implementation and build out those measures. So subsequently, we haven't been able to reach conditions. We haven't been able to secure section 106, and we are, but we agree accepted the application with consideration.
Councillor.
Thank you. I'm very conscious of the amount of support there are for this proposal here, as I was when I proposed that rather than have the original application rejected back in January 2020, I was the one who proposed that it be deferred so that the applicants could bring forward with their application the additional requirements that we needed. Forefront in the top of my mind was an absolute guarantee of what the medical centre was going to be in terms of size, scale, cost, and an absolute guarantee that our community was going to secure that. And second, in the forefront of my mind, I asked that the applicants liaised with the Highways Authority and came up with a scheme that would be acceptable to the Highways Authority. And I'm afraid neither of those have been met. So I'm not going to support the application. I say with a very heavy heart, and I would propose that we go along with officers' advice and reject the application for the reason given by officers.
Is that it is a proposal? You've got a second. You're second in the council, Chris. Do you want to speak or hold back? Right. So that's a proposal to go with officers' advice. Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I did used to live in Byfield many years ago, and I lived in Beckett's Close, so I do know, the area well. And even though the medical centre was my local doctors, I think I only ever stepped foot in there once, thank goodness. Obviously, this is really contentious because this is all about fear of losing your doctor. And obviously, every one of us, always wants to see our doctor, even though it's extremely difficult at times, because I hear every single day about people complaining that they cannot see their doctor. We've got a doctor's practice just literally across the road there, and I think that's probably got about 13,000 people on its books. The car park is like that, and I think there's about 12 parking spaces, but people don't care. All they want to do is see a doctor. They don't care what the room's like, they don't care if it's big, small, shiny, rustic. All they want to do is get in and see that doctor. At the moment, we've got two different doctors' practices here in Daventry. They run differently. One's got an open door, one's got a closed door, plus the buzzer. As for seeing people with abdominal pain, I've had a friend this week. Doctor didn't want to see her, just gave her a telephone consultation. She said to spend 3 days in absolute agony and she had kidney stones. That's why she didn't throw her in. So I've always said it's Woodford that needs a medical centre. And, it's a real shame that the local councils and MPs have not campaigned for that, because Woodford is a far bigger village than Byfield. If Woodford did have a medical centre, Byfield's centre would be adequate for the patients it would then have next door. I know that isn't a consideration tonight, but I think going forward it really needs to be. I know that Woodford has obviously had an influx of housing. I was on planning years ago and I voted against that because I felt it was totally wrong and the roadworks could not support those houses then. There is no safe walk from Woodford to Byfield either, and there's nothing in here that makes that walkway any safer. If many families in Woodford are still only a one-car family, they live in a village, the bus doesn't run that frequently. So, if they can't get a lift or they can't drive, they can't get to the practice. The Quality Care Commission, I got in touch with the Quality Care Commission when I first heard about this application, because I was seriously concerned that what would happen if the practice closed. What they did say to me was that if the practice wouldn't just close its doors, because it has got a duty of care to its patients, but if the doctors decided to retire or leave, then it would be up to the Quality Care Commission to find doctors for the patients. So that was one thing that I felt comfortable about, that you wouldn't lose your doctor, because this is key. I don't think people have signed a petition to say we want 78 houses on a field. This is all solely about having a doctor. We had an old medical practice in Daventry. It was old, but it served really well. Mother and toddler group was absolutely fantastic. We had a nice new shiny building. We no longer have that nice hall. Mother and toddler groups fell apart. New mums lived in isolation. You can do whatever you want to. You could deliver a baby clinic in the village hall. You can have immunisations elsewhere. You don't always have to have it around the centre. They do this in mobiles out in villages. So it's weighing this up. I don't want anybody to lose the doctors. It doesn't sound like they will lose the doctors. We've heard about salaries of the doctor. 20 years they've been in this medical centre. Why haven't they put the money away to build a centre? I don't understand that either. Because, what I would like to say is if this actually got passed, that the 1.25 million was gifted to the parish council and it become their building rather than the doctor's building, because this is a private company. When do we go giving a private company 1.25 million? If that doctor's practice then decided to close, what would you have?
if you know, you've got.
Chair.
So for me, you know, I don't want these 78 houses in there, you know, of everyone's policies. And, but it is about having doctors, so if you're going to be paying a doctors wherever you have it, if it's locally, you know, then I'll be happy to see a doctor anyway.
Thank you. Sorry. Dr. Howard. No. It's unusual to let someone speak again, we did ask, so on the basis that, so you will let me speak.
So as far as I'm aware, I'm sure that the architect has outlined the costs of the medical centre and provided them. That was provided.
Right.
Which is why we have the money for the medical centre and obviously a mortgage from a bank to cover the short, because we know the short is because the architect outlined the cost.
Right, so that's what, right, that's what you believe.
Yes.
Right. Have you seen anything like that?
I think the market is mentioned as design access then, because of
Nothing cemented, so.
I think what I'm saying is that, you know, we're able to develop this reason to be demonstrated. Based on your detailed designs that you put forward. And then subject to that, you know, the costings need to include the build out time as well, because the build out time influence the costings as well. If those details were submitted alongside the highway mitigation, those details could form the balance of this particular argument. But at the moment, you know, from what previous planning committee members asked for, we don't have a lot of those details. Lots of those details are missing. Why the reason applications prefer must have.
Councillor Bittman.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I will join the debate at this stage. I thank the office for producing a finely balanced report. I don't think in any way it comes down strongly in favour of refusal or acceptance of this. I think the report gives us the aptitude as professional planning committee members to form our own. It hasn't forced us to get on one way or the other. We are individuals as a democratic society. We have the ability to make our own minds up. Having listened to the debate, I believe we should go against the officer and accept this. But I would put two provisos on that. I believe that the high raise needs to be conditioned in terms of providing mitigation successfully or in acceptance with high raise as well. And the second point I want to make is we talk about this enabling development. I know quite a bit about that, and I think you're right, that needs to be improved. So given that they can prove that the right amount of development is commensurate with what they're looking for, if the high raise is sorted out, then I would certainly, as their both commission, I'll be very much in favour of this building being done. Can I make another point, and it's perhaps a bit off the wall, but bearing in mind if we refuse this, it could well go to appeal. And I think the inspector will have a completely different view than certain people around this table. And I believe, because that's a personal opinion, but I think an inspector will say, just go on and do this. The community need this. This is a necessary aspect.
Councillor Bittman. Step by step. Is that a proposal to go against office as a part?
I can help you for that if you like, yes.
So,
I'm happy to make that proposal, Chairman. Yes.
would you have a second? You would. Thank you. So we've got two proposals. Councillor Livingston.
Yes, strangely enough, the two proposals, the first proposal to go is not very different from Councillor Greenwood. Because the crux of the matter is that the officers will have been, as I said, the report is very well written. It's easy for everybody to follow what is on. Now, if the officer in front of them have the proposal for my way secured, and we can hold it, and the proposals for the building with all the costs, that will have weighted in the balance to see if the 73 houses, where I am, and I will go back to Councillor Randall, where I am a bit confused. You have the whole impact will be on the poor people of Byfield. So the parish Byfield represent Byfield villagers. The Byfield villagers are not in favour. That is what I listened to. Please, can I finish? I have been a district and a county councillor for a number of years, and I take great umbrage when I see people who have a parish council who represents them, they are all volunteers, they work very hard, and afterwards, when the parish chairman says something because as a parish chairman, he has taken all those hours, and somebody heckled him nearly tonight. I find that very disturbing because your parish councillor and your parish church are the only ones day in, day out here doing your jobs that nobody, if you were against, you should have joined the parish and tried to change the mind of the parish. So I am very, and that is regardless of the outcome of that kind of application. But Councillor Bingham and Councillor Martin, the proposal is not different, and with what we have in front of us tonight, I would like to defer it again. Till we can, we are between the rock and the hard. Because we didn't have all the documents we asked to in 2020. I wasn't encouraged on the council at that time. I know what, and I'm sorry when I say refuse, I wanted to say was deferred. So we can listen to everybody, we can, but we need security. And we have spent a lot of money to have a plan, and that plan secure everybody. If we do not do the assembly properly, we might have 20 other kids like that we can have our plan. So I don't, with what I have inside in front of me tonight, I would ask if we could defer one more time, and you have 6 more months to come with everything. And or at the moment I cannot vote for the proposal for the reason I've just given. I will go with the fiscal pass. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've got 3 now. We'll just read this out, please, just so my good benefit to mention. If demonstrated to be deliverable and subject to implementation of highway mitigation, measures the proposed medical centre would bring about benefits in the provision of a much improved service to both existing and new patients. This is a consideration which weighs heavily in favour of the application. We'll get that.
Yeah.
But that is not what I was proposing, Chairman.
I know you were. Sorry.
I'll just come back to that. I think my concern about proposal as it stands, we don't have these details. And I don't feel that we can condition them. I think we're asking whether an open-ended condition in terms of highway measures there and highway scrutiny, which may not be able to be secured. So in my view, I do feel that if we were able to reach an agreement on the provision of those details, then that would weigh very heavily in favour of the application.
Thank you. And I just want to add to what people really have already said. I have proposed that we go along with officers and reject the application because we don't have the information which is being asked to be conditioned by Councillor Bignell. I too felt that we can't have just an open condition that may never be met, which is why I felt that we have, as a committee, have to go along with councillors' advice. If we had in front of us all of the details that we asked to be brought back to us, I would feel very inclined to go along with the proposal. If everything added up and all the sums were there and the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed, I would probably be inclined to vote for the vote. The fact is, that information hasn't been brought back to us that we asked for. As to what is going to be built for patients, exactly with costings and how the highways situation is going to be resolved. I believe the Highways Authority have actually said that the proposal that's been put forward would actually make the highway less safe than it is now. It's actually what the Highways Authority have said, according to the report. Into account when I make the statement that we go on with an officer's advice and we reject the application. That is something that I'm taking into account, along with the fact that we haven't got laid out in front of us what our public is going to get and how it's going to be costed, which is what I asked for when I asked that the original application be deferred, was so that the fact could be brought back to us, so I could wait for the new surgery and the houses alongside. But I feel that I can't, because unfortunately the applicants haven't brought that information to us. And you know, when I withdraw my proposal so that we could defer yet again, yes, I probably would. That was necessary so that the applicants could bring to us what it was that we asked for. If the applicants felt that they would be able to bring us what we're asking for. Right, sorry, the solicitor would like to say something.
I just want to emphasise, some of you will know, some of you will not know the normal process in determining applications like this. The normal mechanism is an application submitted and considered, and conditions are negotiated, and 6 contributions are sought. And to underline what the panelists have said earlier, and one of 6 contributions is a gift. It is something that would otherwise make the planning develop the proposal unacceptable, acceptable. So in the absence of a 1 of 6 obligation, it is a no, clear as that. So what would normally happen in the committee now is that you have a set of conditions and proposed conditions, you have a proposed 1 of 6 heads of terms, and you determine the application based on those proposals. You may want to add conditions, you may want to remove conditions, but fundamentally you look at the application as presented. You don't alter the application itself. Some councils don't even negotiate a 1 of 6. They insist it's signed before they bring the matter to committee. But what you have to be very clear on, if you resolve to grant permission, it is subject to a set of planning conditions which have to be clear. It is also subject to a set of 1 of 6 obligations, whether it's a payment of money or a scheme of works or whatever, affordable housing, whatever is appropriate to our application. If you have no clarity on that 1 of 6, you have got a problem. And I'm slightly concerned that to talk about can we condition it is kicking that can down the road. You have to know what you are approving in terms of conditions, in terms of 106 obligations. And the key point here, I think, is that when we're referring to the highway element, you could be approving a development for which there is no highway solution. There may, that's been used theoretically, right? But until you have a scheme that is approved by the highway authority, and this is scheme, you don't know. So you could end up with a development and highway chaos. You don't know the stage. And I just want to emphasize that is what you've got to take into account. It's very simple.
Thank you. Sorry,
It's a point of clarification, Chair.
what's the point of clarification?
What I don't understand as board member is that the applicant sent in all the details for heads of terms and details for section 106. When I approached officers, I was advised it's the policy of this council not to enter into negotiation to produce this document. Despite everything being said, so perhaps maybe I'm getting confused, I don't know, but that's the point of clarification I would like from the officer as to the heads of terms that were sent in.
Sorry, John, we'll just answer that, it's fairly straightforward, actually.
Yes, we have had it, we cannot agree and sign section 106 of measures which are agreeable on. However, those have not agreed to those measures. We cannot expect an applicant to say, yes, we'll agree to measures for the highway to carry out works on the highway land, and the highway authorities do not agree with them. In essence, you can grant a planning permission, but if they involve works on the highway authorities are not obliged to come back and say, well, these measures are not safe, and we will still agree to them.
But it's, the point has been clarified, the applicant has sent in the information, but it was not adequate. We
But
need to
it's
take-
arranged, don't it?
Yeah.
Right, if I could suggest something, because obviously there's several schools of thought. John will explain this in planning terms. Could grant a hybrid application, which will make sure that all the costs, everything like that, come forward. Black and white, so everyone's got everything, and that would allow the officer to make sure we're covering all the points up. So see, can they actually come to an agreement with highways and everything else? If that fails, you have to come back to committee. John, would you like to sort of just?
Effectively, I think there is two elements which are of major concern. One is whether or not we can deliver surgery within the required cost, within the funding that's available. Secondly, whether or not we can agree pilot measures to mitigate the impacts of the proposal. So I'm suggesting we actually, the applicants, take this application away, effectively, and come back and submit details, make it a hybrid application. So what we have is then the full details of the surgery that applicants want to build, without all those details in terms of size and scale, and materials they want to use, and all that's costed. And once we have details of those costings, then we're then able to determine whether or not there's sufficient funding to deliver that surgery which they want. And if there isn't sufficient funding, then what is the additional funding that comes from countless to look at. And then they can deal with the highway matter, the separate matter. If they can't deal with the highway matter, there's no solution, they bring it back to the committee.
And is there a time frame?
I think it is very much down to the applicant, really. You know.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just ask,
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I think getting the information to you for the funding of the survey isn't an issue. Time scale about be easy. The trouble we've got is we want to get in room with highways. We'd be trying to do that, to find out exactly what it is they're looking for, and we can't get that meeting, and we don't know why. Councillor Guildford tried to get us all in a room together, and they didn't come to the meeting.
I think in terms of engagement, I think there has been engagement, but however, I don't feel that there's been an agreement on those issues. I see you shaking your head, but from what I'm seeing in terms of the correspondence, you know, that there has been engagement. So I don't think it's a lack of engagement, I think it's a lack of agreement on those matters. But I do feel that those particular issues do need to be resolved, and members can reach a point where they can determine this application.
Thank you. How does that differ to the proposal that the application be deferred until that very same information is brought to us? What's the difference between deferring it and
I think the difference of that, this is currently an outline application. There's no obligation to submit those details and to stick to those details.
Okay.
For the hybrid application, what we're saying is this is what you actually want to see built.
Yeah.
And this is what will be delivered to members of the public, to patients. So based on that construction, what is the cost? Can we actually deliver it based on the surgery we want?
So basically, the residential will be dealt with as an outline, and the doctor's surgery will be dealt as a full application instance.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm going to be a bit pedantic here, I apologize. Now, that application was in front of us in 2020. So today, we have not all what we wanted. Now, will it be easier for the council that we refuse? And the applicant know exactly why we refuse it? Because the applicant can appeal. So that is because we have to think about us as council. Yeah. We all listen and we can see both sides of the agreement, but we have been elected to represent you, but also to make sure that the pound we are paying is not wasted. So for me, maybe tonight, and I need the advice from, it's better that we refuse. You know why we refuse, because we had a lot of debate. You can bring in on the appeal so that you will have quite a clear steer, or you can say, we will not appeal, but we can, because like that it gives our officer much more clarity of what we want. So I don't know if my pedantic.
We'll just let the officer back on that.
I appreciate where you come from, Councillor Smith, but I do feel the applicants want this determined in a manner which has all the information available to members. If they were to go to the appeals, for instance, if members resolve to refuse the application tonight and we went to the appeal, I believe that the appeal would take at least 2 years before it heard, given the current circumstances. And I don't feel that it's in the interests of the community. I don't feel it's in the interests of the applicants that they proceed down that route. It will not just be an issue of significant timescales, but also there will be substantial costs alongside that. But as a matter, obviously, in the event that's the case, I do feel that there are clear indications from members as the information they want, and what I feel that it's quite clear that the information they want to determine the application. I also believe that she believes that information could be forthcoming very easily, but at the moment we don't have that information. It's clear that information can be provided. So I think my view is that if there's an indication that information can be provided, and then we ought to allow the opportunity to do so.
Councillor Bicknell, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the officer for bringing forward this hybrid type application. In fact, just over a week, as we voted on the hybrid application in Folkestone, where the actual development was in outline and the infrastructure that delivered that was a full planning decision. It's an excellent way of splitting the two out and bringing it together. And I think, we don't want to refuse it, accept it might in the latter information or kick it down the road further. I think hybrid is definitely the way to go. I think it's time effective and effective way we can work with this. Thank you for that proposal.
Does that mean
I'll withdraw my
that's the
original application. I'll place that the hybrid application as suggested by the case officer as a proposal. So,
yours? I will withdraw. So, are you okay with that?
Just want to clarify on the residential part of the application, is that? Sorry.
That would be determined, yes, but it would have, that would make an outline only. What I'm suggesting that we make it a hybrid application, so we get the details of the costings, the details of the surgery, and then we also get mitigation measures from the highway side. So let's be, sorry. So yes, let's be without the highway
Discussion about the heart of landscape visual.
yeah, so then that way the balance in, we bring it back and forth numbers, that's the hybrid application. Members determine whether or not there are still highway issues or not, if they've been resolved, that we would be coming forward with details of the costings for the building which doctors want to see built, which we could secure under conditions. And then where the balance of whether or not members would consider that the benefits of the proposal would outweigh the harm.
So it would be coming back here. You okay with that, councillor? So you withdraw this as a second. Right. Is everybody happy with what John has said and what's happening? Yes? Sorry, councillor Rand.
Yeah, I've just got one question. Of the affordable housing, what percentage was that still not covered in terms? Usually try to aim for.
It's only 40%. However, it was subject to a viability assessment, and actually so had to go to a viability assessment. And it was subject to an independent review as well. And that independent review did conclude that with the contract contribution and the equal land, that would be the optimum viable provision.
Okay, so you're missing 20% for affordable housing or contribution towards it. So 30% for contribution. Okay.
So instead of that, they're giving the land and the 1.25 million contribution.
So not giving to that.
So, so debated it now, didn't leave it there.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice if someone suggested that now. Do you need a proposal? I do need a proposal. I haven't had a proposal that this come back to us as a hybrid application. You have the direction the way that's phrased. Yeah, so that's that. Second, right, just get it on as a hybrid.
Okay.
I know you seconded. Do you second councillor Brown? Right, so we're okay with that, so that is the proposal. Those in favour of that proposal? I think that's unanimous. Right, so that is carried. Finish that now. Just finish.
Just sense that you're
people now.
Second application.
2021-0174.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is an application for the demolishing of the existing bungalow. Construction of two properties. One is a two-bed bungalow from the site, and the other one is a two-story property here at the back with the construction of a detached garage there. The existing building has actually got planning permission, so this one here, for the construction of like a story to make it a two-story property. So members have to consider that there has been a two-story property be allowed in a sense by increasing the size of the existing property. So this is a site which is within the confines of the village. It's not in a conservation area. There are no listed buildings within it. As officers, we consider the construction of the two properties will not have a harmful effect on the atmosphere of the area. As you can see, these are the designs. So this is the bungalow which is proposed for the front of the site, and this is the two-story property which is located to the back. And this is the garage. So you can see here, sort of the property which is two-story, the garage and the bungalow. And as also you can see there's adequate parking and turning space. So highways have this problem with this proposed development. The main concerns, as you see through your papers tonight, is really the impact on residential amenity through either overlooking loss of light. So as officers, again, we considered the impacts, and in planning terms, as officers, we consider those impacts are considered to be acceptable. Now, it is a weird site in the sense that it's L-shaped, and you've got some properties here, such as Rose Cottage, which have habitable rooms directly looking over to the garden area of the Scaries at the moment, and similar to the property at Steeton Stores, which actually have got flats above. So this is the relationship which I'm going to go through now through the photos. Again, this is looking towards the old house, which is in excess of 50 metres from sort of the properties. So this is again the existing bungalow. So, and that's the paddock view is here. So again, this is the paddocks, which is paddock view, sorry, which is 1.5 story property. So if I go back to the layout, I don't go through the slide too quickly. This is the 1.5 story property. So this is being proposed to be 2 story. This is an existing 2 story, and this is an existing 2 story. So as officers, we consider the relationship is acceptable, therefore recommended for approval. Members will note that I have seen signs of some sort of letter which has gone round to all councillors, again similar to the previous application. We did not put those into written updates or late representations because you've seen them. All I'm going to say is I haven't assessed them at all, or the police officer hasn't assessed them for clarity or whether they are actually accurate. So that's all I'm going to say on those. So 18 members, thank you.
Thank you. I suspect somebody weren't here for the first application, speakers. I guess that's the case. Right, so there's a list of speakers, 3 minutes each. But after the 3 minutes, the committee can ask questions of the speakers for clarity. So that's just so you're aware. So you've had everything everyone else has had. Okay. So it's the speakers first, questions back to them, and then it's back to the committee to have the debate. Okay. The officer will summarise after you've made your representations. So the first speaker is Paul Maynard, please.
Got 3 minutes, sir. Sure, thank you. So I'm going to be talking through the objections from Rose Cottage and from Daventry House. So for Rose Cottage, the proposed 2-storey house is of an over size. It's an overlooking issue. The windows on the back of the house looking into the windows of houses cottage, and this has been clearly shown in the appendix of images of the video that we sent to the committee members on Monday. It cuts out light and the heating effect of the sun onto the rear of Rose Cottage in the late afternoon and evening, so they completely lose their sunset. As members, we commissioned a 3D model of the proposal to help everyone understand the scale, proximity, and the implications. And this provides a much better and more realistic understanding of the impact of the scheme than the basic 2D drawings that were submitted by the architect. We actually also took the 3D model and geolocated it accurately on the block, so that it shows the sun's path and the overshadowing effect in an accurate way. In the house, there's a loss of privacy issue from the proposed bungalow at the front of it. It's been located so that the windows, the patio doors, and the garden terrace all face Daventry House. So based on this application, we would request a 2-metre high close walled fence rather than planting on the boundary line. However, we would have thought that a better scenario would be to change the orientation of the bungalow so that it faces away from Daventry House. They don't look into us, we don't look into them, and it would also create a south-facing patio for the bungalow, which would be better for the applicant. In 2019, a planning application from the previous owner was approved for a 2-storey house on the site of the existing bungalow, and that's more towards the front of the plot. But the issue with this latest application is that the 2-storey house has been pushed further back on the plot. Small apartments and multiple objections, because the 2-storey house looks into the back of Daventry House. It's overbearing and blocks light to paddock view and their solar panels in the mornings. It overlooks Rose Cottage and overshadows them in the evenings. So if they didn't have a 2-storey house at the back of the plot, some of these problems would go away. So therefore, based on the current drawings, we would urge you to reject this planning application and encourage the applicant to consider drawings that will avoid the objections through collaboration with the neighbours, which, to be honest, hasn't happened yet. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Members, any questions? Absolutely no.
Any objection to the existing planning permission for the 2-storey property that's there? It's been proposed and accepted.
We have no objections.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you. You used the phrase "we" when you were speaking, and I just wondered, I've just got you down as an objector, I don't have a title, are you part of a group? Sorry, I'm Paul Meyer, Daventry House, which is on the immediate, and I was also talking for young the owners of Rose Cottage. Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Thank you. Martin? Oh, pronounce the second name wrong. Got 3 minutes.
Can just add that the we, the 3 of us all commissioned this 3 model. So, I'm Martin Betts, I own Paddock View. So I'm not going to go over what Paul said because it covers some of what I wanted to say, but specifically about Paddock View's objections. So I wanted to reiterate the objections that I registered following each revision to the drawings. And these are still relevant primarily for revision C, which is the latest designs. And the simulations we have generated provide evidence to back up our concern, which hopefully we'll see through various communications or through responses to the revisions. So specifically, the 2-storey house at the rear, the plot is too large and not overbearing size. This affects my visual immunity and affects my pattern light. So specifically, this will affect the energy production of my solar panels, causing increase in energy bills and loss of green energy production. So that's particularly soon given the current energy crisis. This affects the sunlight into the bedroom of my garage when my son sleeps, which warms, and in the winter this warms significantly in the room over the winter months. This will also affect my energy bills, and it will also affect the heat absorption of the house, as it will be in the shadow of the house in the mornings and the winter months. The width and position of the two-storey house, which is positioned at the narrowest point of the plot, will cause damage to the depth to the bushes and trees, which create unnatural border. So for a house of that size, you have to take some pretty significant foundations, and due to its width, it is going to end in the construction process. Normally, the foliage represents the roots of the trees, so I can't see how you can dig that foundation without killing the trees or significantly injuring them. And secondly, due to the width of it, how are they going to get construction materials to the back of the house? How are they getting tools and machines? I don't think the actual feasibility of construction has been probably thought through. And finally, it was cut into the ground, so it was part of the house and requirement to be in line with ridge line with neighbouring properties, Birdfield and also Rose Cottage, I believe. So why is back use to conform to that ridge line, but this house is not? So the Regional Energy Planning Committee to reject the planning proposal. Planning application encourage applicants to work with the local community to find a solution that everyone can work with. Repeatedly offered my inputs to the applicants and the architects, and my door is still open, but now it's just for mitigations. So, as Paul mentioned, move the house to the high street side. The original location, no problems at all. It's all caused by the house being further back. Two properties are desired by landowner and one bungalow towards the rear of the low ridge line would be acceptable. But when necessary, mitigate all the issues, so particularly those in the Rose Cottage.
You just did very quick, and so that was it.
Oh, that's all
Anyone got any questions? Councillor Smith.
Yes, could you confirm that at no point the owner of the property or the applicant has not proposed to you what he was going to give or any discussion? So when you saw what was in front of you, that was what happened. So you had.
Right at the beginning, some drawings were shown. And like all things, you kind of see it effectively. You see it the first time, you time to digest it. And when actually considering the location, the height and size, and thinking about the scale of it, that's when the problems with it. But from that point, we went to the application process, and that's when we had the chance to raise our concerns. And following that first set of drawings, despite the objections from neighbours, there was little to no engagement before the second revised plan on the 23rd of December. Again, it was very hard to engage. There has been some engagement, there has been minor tweaks, but it hasn't addressed the major concerns, unfortunately.
Thank you. Councillor Bickman.
Yes, thank you. The officer did say that your property, which is Paddock View, and the Rose property are in line horizontally, so they would form a natural thing. But could you indicate how much higher the ridge of the newer house is compared to the ridge of your house?
I believe it's about 2.5 metres. So I'll have to ask the architect for sure, because the topography's been done for next door, but not for mine, so I don't know the precise heights and it's hard to tell exactly what the difference is, but I'm sure the architect will confirm what it is to be.
Yes.
Was your property cut into the land? Because it's quite open, so when it was constructed.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, as part of the planning application, there was some drawings showing that compares the Birdfield, the proposed Paddock View, second owner, and Rose Cottage, which I've provided some evidence shows that was an important factor.
Right. Nobody? No.
you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. My name's Councillor David O'Neill. I'm Vice Chairman of Guildford Parish Council. I'm also an LRTPI planner, and I've lived in the village for 30 years. Like the neighbours whom I thought spoke very well, our parish council is very frustrated with this application, as with the right design we could have supported it. Following the parish council's initial strong objection and the case officer's ongoing design involvement, the scheme is a little better, but it's still a poor scheme that failed several of the neighbourhood plan policies, which should not have been recommended for approval. As you know, Daventry area's rural housing application has been met, and our neighbourhood plan positively supports some new housing, including bungalows in the village confines. We will end up, though, with a replacement bungalow and a 4-bedroom house. There is a complication that there's a recently approved but unbuilt detached house replacing the current bungalow. The officer report tries to make the case that this consented house is so similar to the proposed dwelling that it is acceptable. But surprisingly, the report does not emphasise that the application building is now over 5 metres nearer Paddock View at its northwest corner and 12 metres nearer at its southwest corner. Paddock View, as Martin said, was consented in 2009, and in order to gain consent, the ridge line was required to be lowered so it did not overpower the neighbouring properties. And the same principle of not overpowering the neighbouring properties that Paddock View and the Elms, to my mind, clearly applies. This application is for a full-height, 2-storey plus roof building sitting on a raised platform over Paddock View. The officer could have steered the design for a storey and a half, but I assume did not, since the recommendation is for approval. Our neighbourhood plan policy 11 requires that the development of the historic High Street needs to be of a high quality that responds positively to its context by reinforcing local distinctiveness, including street patterns, siting, form, scale, mass and architectural features. The 2 buildings proposed cannot be said to meet this positive reinforcement requirement. The village report inaccurately summarised my council proposed conditions, so if we do decide to approve, might I please request the following 3 conditions: that the fence between the proposed bungalow and the Elms be a 6-foot close boarded wooden fence, and that the application area is in the worst spot in the village and suffers already very badly from primary school and secondary school traffic. Can construction and delivery traffic please avoid the school pickup and drop off times? Finally, no further development under PE rights and preferably no further development of that allowed at all. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, sir. Members, any questions of Mr. O'Neill? Councillor Anderson.
Yes, so you say that you have a neighbourhood plan.
Yes.
That happened to and your neighbourhood plan was type of policy for the type of houses you wanted.
Yes, it does.
So, and you do not recommend 4-bedroom houses?
Well, we specifically have said that we want a certain number of houses up to 28, and we put the emphasis on small 2-bedroom and bungalow houses for the obvious reasons of encouraging young people and also older people to downsize. Thank you. Nobody else? Councillor Walton, please.
Councillors. As the Lord Councillor for Hillsborough, I went and looked at the site on one day last week with the occupants of their owners of the house concerned, and they were good walk. I don't know if the officer's actually been to the site and seen the different levels in person, because Paddock View is a long way down, a lot lower down. It's about a metre and a half dug into the ground. It's very misleading on your pictures. It doesn't actually show how much lower down it is. But when you go around and look at the site, the height of the house, it's so the proposed development, so varying on the houses around it. And just looking at pictures and the differences, looking at 2.5 metres difference. Rose Cottage has got two windows at the back there, one from the bathroom, one from the sitting room. They will be there, I've blocked out. Here, it's got solar panels, and with it being sitting down as low as it is compared to the height of this proposal, which is right behind the fence to it, I think 3/4 of the day it's not going to be light at all. It's totally blocked out. Down view, Daventry house from the bungalow, yes, they've got overlooking windows, and Ashton suggested they could turn around the bungalow slightly so they're not overlooking into there. We've got 6 foot fence, so that's securable. And at the back of the proposed development, they're looking into the old house gardens and looking into their top windows, looking straight over the wall into the garden, so privacy issues there. It's totally a very property. If there was a bungalow, if there's 2 bungalows, it would be ideal, because it wouldn't be upsetting anyone. It was sticking to the 2019 proposal, which is no complaints about. But to propose this, I'm totally against it, and I'm going to go against the officer on this, and I propose that we totally go against it. Thank you very much.
Any members like to ask councillor questions? Councillor Matthews. Just for the benefit of the public, you make sure you are extremely. You're not thinking them. Okay, councillor.
What, Councillor Walters, I don't mistake, it's over there. Do we have a drawing to show what it will be truly from the same side? Yeah.
So, through you, Chair, so this is the outline of the paddock here.
Yes.
So you can see the relationship with sort of the side on property. So this is sort of face on, so this is the rear elevation of the proposed 2-storey elements. And you see the relationship to paddock view here. And also, just to clarify, the red line is the outline of the existing extant commission of the red line here. If I can show you a picture of what has been allowed. So this is the 2-storey building, sort of the 4-peak finish to the existing building. Yeah, the location is on the existing building in the centre, isn't it? It's the same height. It's roughly the same height as what's been, it's about 200 mils, sort of different height. So I measured previous proposal about 8.1 metres, and this existing proposal about 8.3.
But it's in a different place.
Yes.
Councillor. Do we have a perhaps do we need the applicant's agent to speak? Yes, that's yeah. I'm just making sure because we. I know I just wondered why you were carrying on. Because I'm wondering why you've got a carry on. Yes, I agree. Absolutely should be asking. Nobody else. Right. Thank you, Councillor. Right. We'll now move on to the applicant agent, which is 15 minutes.
Yeah, do you mind if I stay seated?
Absolutely. 3 minutes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'll let the architectural solutions to speak in support of this application. By time, the applicant owns and runs seats and stores, which is located immediately adjacent to the application site. At this time, my client has to travel on low 7 days a week. It's currently rented property by selling 2 second stores.
much time for dinner with his young family, and then return back in the evenings, working until the shop closes. Duties running the store out partially shared with his brother, who also lives and travels from West Ham. When the arcade site was offered for sale, planning permission to increase the size of the condo to two-storey dwelling was considered an ideal opportunity for my client to purchase and develop the site to provide his family home immediately adjacent to work, face work. Condo approval scheme has no views of the garden to the rear of stores from within the dwelling, nor does it benefit from the side views to the rear, as these would be obstructed by paddock view. Following discussions, it was suggested that if we were a small bungalow to put in the site frontage, this would also provide a separate family home for my client's brother family. The proposed bungalow in position 4 of the existing bungalow on the site, and the two-storey dwelling has been sited to the rear site, rotated to be parallel and flat forward paddock view. The rear proposal is in line with the rear paddock view, moving in overlooking the shoes. There is a current 4 metre high established hedgerow on the boundary of the paddock view, which is being retained. Also, there's a difference in ground levels between our site, which is not to the levels of which have just been mentioned. The rear paddock view will be, there will be limited views of the dwelling due to the hedge. We're proposed to remove the trees, which we mentioned. Be appointed to the work, ensure no damage will cause any of the tree within the action of the year. Also, a window to both cottage. This is no different to that of the situation of the company approved scheme. My client is happy to discuss suitable screening of the community area woodlands where it's much to address printing between properties. Separation distance between the windows with adjacent properties or exceed standard requirements as has been confirmed to conclude, currently extend planning permission to extend the existing bungalow to create a two-storey dwelling on the site. The location can be seen on our drawings of the existing two-storey approved scheme, and we do not consider citing our new two-storey dwelling slightly further back causes any further impact onto the remaining properties that have been approved. The actual site coverage to our proposals is not similar to that as already approved. Trust that you follow the officer's recommendation, allowing my client to build his family home where he can balance work and playtime with his young family without having to travel many miles every day.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Councillor Whitman.
Yes, you cite the fact that the owner of the potential owner of this property works next door. But planning policy is about the form and size of the building. It's got nothing to do with the people that live in houses, and that's not planning considerations.
Well, consider it
isn't a planning consideration. The people that live in a house.
I think what he's having to travel back and forth miles a day on several occasions, which should have an impact on the power footprint, etc. So it is that relationship, not a planning consideration. Okay, whatever it is.
Thank you. And we talk about the view from Rose Cottage not being affected. Well, at the moment, you can just see the back of the existing bungalow, so you can then say, well, put another story out, that's fine. But this new properties, you can see from there, that's nearly the whole side of the property back from it. So the view from Rose Cottage is tremendously changed from the window. I've seen it.
The view from the first floor window is far from the window, it's Rose Cottage.
Yeah, it's not placed, though, it's not good.
No, but why do you consider that to be an issue when the separation distances between the two properties is very
I'm just looking at that diagram, there's a square, it's one out, but existing building, these building that's virtually moved off. There's very little building requirements from the existing footprint. So it's moved back into the view of Rose Cottage.
I think we're sorry. I'll take it as a understanding now.
Yeah.
It's, I don't want to debate them backwards and forwards. But I can start. Anyone else? Councillor Rapp.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say is obviously we're in a climate emergency and I wouldn't want to see a fence. I'd much rather see hedgerows.
Any more questions? No?
Councillor.
Just for clarification, Councillor Bingo said that the files at that property and the next door store belong to the same person is not a planning application. I think it could be made a planning application, because if you link the two, because it's to help, is that an understanding or not?
No, it's not reasonable for us to impose a condition.
No.
Because well, there's an existing house there already, so in any sense, principle of government, so it's considered acceptable.
Thank you. Nobody else? Right, we'll open this up now to committee members only. Any questions? Councillor?
Yeah, it's a question for officers. You have proposed that this planning application be accepted. That it meets all the requirements. We're hearing a lot of objection with regards to the views of surrounding houses and the amenity of the surrounding houses. If this committee was to reject this application on the grounds of the amenity of use and they were to go to appeal, what do you think the likelihood is of their winning the appeal?
The cost of review isn't a planning consideration. Now, so you've got to consider sort of the subjective arguments, like on all applications such as design. And obviously, officers have considered that the development itself is acceptable, the bearing impact is acceptable, and sort of the loss of light issue is acceptable. Now, if members are concerned about potentially putting a two-storey, it's being moved closer, then obviously that is a consideration that members may decide, actually, I don't like it being as tall as it is, where it is. I think it's going to cause an overbearing impact to the adjoining neighbour. It is a subjective decision. So, and again, you never know when you go to planning inspectorates. Some planning inspectorates allow that sort of thing, some planning inspectorates don't.
So, thank you very much.
Sorry, Councillor Frost. So,
Thank you, Chair. For many years, I was a leading light in the Coral Society. Okay. Site very well. It's next door to the shop. I enjoyed reading the officer's report. I thought it was very clear. Proposed, we can see the drawing in front of us now. You can see that the outcome of allowing this proposal would be that the bungalow at the front would line up with the next door property, obviously assisting in some way a continuation of the street scene, and the rear property lines up with the previous backland development behind that. And so I don't accept that the intrusion into the view from Rose Cottage is unacceptable, and I would like to propose that we go with officer's advice and approve the application.
that's the proposal, sir.
Yeah.
Would you have a second for that proposal? No, right, where's the opposite? Something with this, having a second for that proposal. Council is doing that, right, thank you. So just got that as the substantive motion. Councillor Frost.
Yeah, I'd like to, that's the opposite. Astonished actually that words of not to me. I have to say, the person that on residential community neighbourhood properties and there's a settlement in terms of access, one vision highway safety, but it's diametrically opposite to what we That's it. I don't know the actual, that's true, but the, my opinion, its application is contrary to RA2, Guildford Secondary Service Village, and under section C part 2. Sorry, 1. And the inappropriate scale relative to the secondary service village, not resulting in existing services project form such in the village. It's against every. So we go against it as well.
Also, if I may come back, also, would you want to add other policies, especially if you?
We can add to that. Like the second proposal, we should go ahead to the whole.
Say it now. Say something now to add to it, with the permission of the person who's put forward the proposal.
Well, the main thing is the scale and impact on the visual amenity and neighbourhood amenity, which we covered off on that. It's against the local plan in terms of the form, because it particularly highlights that part of the village, which is the high street, and I think it's North Rock, which isn't here, but it specifically says that it should be in keeping with the type of buildings there, so it's against that quality of the local plan.
Right. Would you be happy with that, Councillor Cross? Yeah. What's been said? Yes. So I think you said R2 1. I remember right. C1 was it? Yeah. And then what's been added is scale amenity. Yeah. And the local plan. Right.
Which is adopted in 2021 October.
Excellent. Right. So they're the two. Councillor Evanson.
Yes, well, we can all see what was a two-bedroom, as a two-story former proposal. Now, with the new orientation and so on, how many meters there is between the house and Rose Cottage?
I measured it about 16 metres.
So they don't have the 22 meters.
The 22 metres is when you've got back to back, so you've got rooms facing rooms in a sense. Whereas the proposal with Rose Cottage is at an oblique angle. So it's more side onto, so there's no windows on here which face directly into Rose Cottage. All the windows are facing that way.
I think we've acknowledged that the unique relationship between Rose Cottage and the previous bungalow that's already there, and the fact that you've got that unique relationship between those two. You've got a historic unglazed window at the bathroom, and then the lounge floor on the second floor does overlook the bathroom, does overlook the back garden. I think that loss of amenity needs to be considered by members when we do it. And plus with the other houses, we've got the change of gradient as well, which is quite significant, which really the plans don't show, which does bring over there on the site, particularly at Daventry, on that side.
Right. So I'm assuming now no one else wants to speak.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but you had side down here.
So, unlike some members here, I actually visited the site last week and went to understand the 3D impact of it, and particularly from the paddock view. And I've also pointed out there's only two people in favour of this. One is the officer, and one is the applicant. There's no supporters here. There's no supporters in the village. The parish council's against it. So let's move on. So the plan, the neighbourhood planning policy talks about development where existing buildings and structures are designed to integrate well in terms of locations, on particular the wider character and distinctiveness of the village, particularly in the important historic core where this is, what the high street, and it is particularly sensitively developed, commensurate with the state of its individual features and the setting of the streetscape as a whole. This is a plot on the landscape at the back of a plot that doesn't name those. Moving on. I've already said about the people living in the building, I take exception from the bit in the officer report that says it will facilitate the sustainable operation of the village store and move its currently to make a car journey. That is not policy, that shouldn't be considered. policy R1, that talks about Daventry area in terms of the amount of housing. It says, it states that further housing development will only be permitted where it can demonstrate either will result in environmental improvement. Sorry, well, I don't think it does that. And it's required to support the retention of local services and threat. It certainly doesn't do that. It talks about the impact of flows dwelling and compares it to the already granted two-storey dwelling on the site. Everybody's in agreement with granted two-storey dwelling on the site. I don't think anybody around this room, either on this side of the room or this side, laughing out to him, will have an argument with that. So it's a bit unfair to suggest that this enlarged version was moved right back away from this bungalow. There's acceptable for that. Then we go to neighbouring amenities. If you actually go to, we'll talk about the Rose Cottage, old house. If you go to Planet View, you go down the drive, that's including what's happening on the right hand side, because the bank stays the same. It comes right up to the boundary on the edge of Planet View, and it's absolutely onerous. And looking at the things, the gutter levels, I call it, and the river course, well, the gutter course, not the rich goes, the gutter, the level of the gutter and the bottom of the river is level with the top of the ridge of Planet View. So remember that it's got a very high pitch. So it's well above and it's down it, and that's heard from it that all the land, so all the light is lost and casts a shadow on there. On solar panels. Daventry House, it would have been better if the bungalow around the way we consider what's in front of us, but basically at the moment, you look out Daventry House and straight into the bungalow. Yeah, I couldn't see that whatsoever. So, in summary, I think we should reject this application. If they choose to effect the existing machine, which is on the same footprint, and I think that would be happy for everybody. So that's what I would propose. I mean, the other thing I would consider was send 3D imagery. I know that's outside the updates and things that the officers have got, but it gave a great idea of how one road looks together. And it's a shame we don't use such technology in this department. It's not affordable, I don't know. But it's a fantastic job in terms of the way it demonstrates what we can't see on a piece of paper. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. That's good motion.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the 3D images, obviously, we can't confirm whether they are sort of sufficient, whether they're accurate. Sometimes 3D images can sort of portray something in a worse light, sometimes they can portray something in a best light. Now, so obviously, officers have got to thought that all the impacts are considered to be acceptable. Obviously, the impact on sort of the amenity of the residential properties, it's all pretty much in line. By the way, to the front is single story, so as officers consider that the mitigation measures which are proposed into the conditions are acceptable. In regards to the two-story property, so in terms of loss of lights, I have got concerns about that because it meets all the 45 and 60-degree rule angle. Now, if members are actually saying actually it's the overbearing impact on the immunity or on the immunity of the adjoining neighbour, that would be preferable and sort of could be more sort of used as a potential reason for refusal.
In respect, I thought that's what we did say. Loss of amenity,
The loss of immunity can mean a number of things, such as loss of privacy, which I know has been mentioned, and loss of light, whereas the overbearing impact is something potentially sort of slightly different.
Right.
Thank you. Nobody else? Right, so we've got a proposal, the first one, proposed by Councillor Chamberlain, I think seconded by Councillor Wilford, which was to accept officers' advice. Those for that motion, please. 2,
Those against? So that fails. Then go to the next one, which was Councillor Frost, seconded by Councillor Bignell, which is to not accept officers' advice. For the reasons stated, please. I've got listed.
RA2, yeah, RA2, C, yes, to.
And I would also potentially add three chair, ENB 10, which relates to the design, which also talk about
What about R1, Chair?
the residential amenity as well. And also, as Councillor Bignell did say in his speech earlier, whether you include R1 and
Certainly, and thank you.
R1, section 1 and 2, which is the environmental improvement or retention of local services.
yeah, it's the second part of the R1 sort of section.
So what we've got there, just to be clear, he's adding, we've got R1, R2, that's right, saying that.
See, one being the appropriate scale relative to the secondary service village.
So that's C1.
Yeah.
So that's C1.
And then there's C3, which protects the form, character, and setting of the village and areas of historical and environmental importance, including those identified in the conservation appraisals. And number 6, which protects the community of residential.
It's also contrary to what I was earlier, to the net plan.
Yeah, we just did R1. Sorry.
Yeah, so we can sort that out relevance if members agree and add other potential relevance.
Okay.
Yeah.
policy. Yeah.
Favour of plan.
With the R into the MB 10, local plan,
Then they
neighbourhood plan, so each one is a local plan, the neighbourhood plan, and over there. Yeah? We both happy with that.
Yeah.
So the main concern is the overbearing aspect and the impact on the character of the streets.
Right. So we now need to vote on that to reject officers' advice. Okay. So that's 6, 4, against, 2,
And 4.
Just for the record, those for the motion, which is to reject officers' advice. Seven? Good.
Sorry, Chair.
Those against, please. 2. So the proposal fails for the reason stated.